supporters and his U.S. spokesman Benjamin Haddad joining us from Paris. Hopefully joining us before you pop too many bottles of champagne. Congratulations.
Thank you, Leland. Good to be here.
What struck me in this speech, it was in some ways, it was almost Kennedy-esque in sort of the idealism, the looking forward parts, what he promised, the bringing together. But something struck me. He says, a new page of history based on hope. What does that mean? And that is the crux of the, if you will, knock on Macron, is that long on rhetoric, what does this new page of history mean?
No, you're absolutely right. This is an incredible message of hope and optimism that is sent by the French population to the rest of the world. We've gone through rough years, as you know, terrorist attacks, high unemployment, especially for young people, and yet you have this 39-year-old liberal, pro-European, centrist, free market reformer who's emerging, who was an unknown figure in French politics just 3 years ago, who created his own political movement from scratch a year ago, and who rises to become French president. This is completely unprecedented. It's a very optimistic message. Now, that being said, the task is considerable. As I said, we are fighting radical Islamic terrorism. We'll have to open and reform the job market. It is way too rigid with free market reforms, and obviously address the challenges that are faced by Europe and the Eurozone. So the challenges are immense, but it is time to celebrate tonight.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be getting there. We'll put up some pictures of the Louvre celebration, which is where all of Mr. Macron's supporters have gathered. As you point out, a young president, 39 years old, the youngest president of France since Napoleon, and he comes in, as you point out, to an economy in distress, if you will, fighting terrorism, but also trying to figure out how to learn politics. What's the plan? You're heading into legislative elections. You need the legislature in order to try to make some of the reforms you just talked about. How does this political novice navigate these troubled waters?
Well, you're absolutely right. So as you know, the parliamentary elections, which he needs to win to get a majority in parliament to have a cabinet, will take place in a month. And, what the French have signaled as well today with both Macron and also with Marine Le Pen is that they're fed up with politics as usual. France has been governed by the left and the right, the socialists and the Republicans for the last 40 years. Both these parties were eliminated from the second round. They were at third and fifth. What does it mean? It means that the French population wants change, wants new faces, wants new figures in parliament. And I think they will be consistent, and it will give Mr. Macron a majority in parliament next month to especially embark on his ambitious project of a reform, especially, as I said, to, I think, the job market.
Obviously, we'll allow you all to savor this victory, but I want to get this in. Marine Le Pen, depending on how the exact numbers work out, will get between 11 and 12 million votes. She is the daughter of a Holocaust denier. She's suffered an enormous amount of criticism for being an anti-Semite herself, and yet 11 or 12 million people voted for her. What does that say about the state of France, and what can Mr. Macron do to, if you will, salve the wound that so many people in your country feel, not necessarily in Paris, but in a huge part of the heartland?
No, you're absolutely right. This is the highest score the National Front has ever gotten in a national election. A third of the French voters have decided to support it. And we have to listen to this message. There is anger. There are legitimate grievances coming from voters because of the failures of both political parties, and especially the socialist government that has been in power for the last 5 years, to really address the issues of insecurity.
Fair to point out that a socialist government that Mr. Macron was a member of. He was the economy minister.
Absolutely. He was a member. He was the economy minister for 2 years. He tried to reform, and he was blocked by his own majority. So instead of shutting up, he actually decided to resign and create his own movement a year ago. His candidacy is actually a consequence of his tenure as economics minister, as in the blockade that he saw. And I think most French people saw this. This is why they decided to support him. But it will be very important to address these grievances when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to terrorism, when it comes to the shortcomings of the European Union. But doing it differently than the National Front. The National Front is hijacking these grievances with a message of xenophobia, of racism, of anti-Semitism. So we'll have to give real solutions, pragmatic solutions and reforms to address this anger.
Well, a lot of work ahead for you and for a very young president that you helped elect. Benjamin Haddad, the U.S. spokesman for Emmanuel Macron, now president-elect of France. Ben, enjoy a couple bottles of champagne tonight. The work starts tomorrow.